Welcome, everyone. Another
Morning.
episode. Good morning, good afternoon. For me, almost good night in Greece. Happily, I still have electricity. That's a major flex in Europe right now. How are you doing today, Versan?
I can't complain. You know how it is. I mean, every week, man, just a tidal wave of information comes through, and I'm telling you, it's more important ever, like now, to break this all down and hopefully maybe just understand where the hell this is all going, really. But
Well,
it's just
honestly,
overwhelming.
you look fresh today, man. I see the sun is shining there. I wish it was my morning time. However, we have a lot to discuss today. One of the my title, because I know we have different titles, I brought to the table
Yeah.
that we have a major power grid shutdown in Europe. So I want to bring this to the screen. As you can see, Spain and Portugal hit by an unexplained power blackout, wiping out traffic lights and causing travel chaos. For the ones that don't know, I lived many years in Portugal before I came to Greece, so I have lots of friends there, and I have been contacting them and trying to understand what's really happening. I know also other European countries were affected, but not as much as Portugal and Spain. So I want to make a summary of the information that I got today. I know a lot of people are wondering what's happening in Europe. So France was also affected, but mainly Portugal and Spain. And what's interesting is that the entire country, Spain was partially affected, but in Portugal, it was the entire country. And some interesting things are happening. One of them is that they don't have a prediction yet of when electricity is going to come back. All the major cities like Lisbon or also Algarve, which is a big region in Portugal, is also still without electricity. So we are almost at the end of the day. It's actually 6 p.m. in Portugal. In Greece, it's actually 8 p.m. Happily, I am not affected here, but we don't know if that's going to affect more European countries. And some of the interesting things is that people are rushing to the supermarket. So Versan always talk about the importance of having water. And look what's happening here in Portugal. I get this image from a friend of mine who lives in Portugal. So you can see that the water supply is drying out in the supermarkets. The water company also say that there might be a failure on the supply of water. So people are advised not to use a lot of water during these days. And the fact that still don't have a prediction on when that's going to happen. And let me just share here some image. I have to remove this one second. And here we can see that the transportation is offline. Basically, we underestimate a lot of what can happen when the supply goes down, but I was also informed that most people don't have physical cash. So you can imagine that a lot of people are trying to withdraw money from the ATMs and they simply cannot withdraw money from the ATMs. I already heard rumors of people paying more money for bottles of water. So because there's a scarcity, of course, it's a matter of supply and demand. So I heard of people paying, let's say, €5 for a bottle of water, which should cost about 20 cents. That's happening on real time. And well, there's no prediction of when the power is going to come back in Portugal. I know some cities where the power is already back, but in the major cities is still everything offline. And that's a great reminder, first, on how easily they can manipulate us. I think the the European, I forgot her name now, but she works for the European Central Bank. She came out a couple of weeks ago and made a video telling Europeans to prepare for such scenarios. So I remember they have a video telling people to get lighters and all of stock water to make stockpile of water. A lot of people made fun of that, but honestly, we know that I don't think that's a coincidence. That for me seems more like an inside job that also increases the risks for cyber attacks. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, Versan. What do you think it's important for people to do to get prepared for such a scenario?
Again, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And Edo, I'm just so glad that you're okay. I called you like 3 times before we got on. I was like, "Do you have power? Do you have power?" Because I was concerned, you know. And I've told you this many times, Edo. If anything does happen, you're always welcome at my place. My place is your place, right? And I'm happy to just see all the comments in here. People are saying have a generator, and other people are also tuning in from all over the world. Teresa, I know her very well, actually. Australian Alps, all good there. So I'm just glad other people are doing fine. But, you know, it's very important to recognize that power grids have always been extremely vulnerable. If you think about it, they were built for a world that was once very less interconnected decades ago. Some of our systems here in the US are even built for 25 years ago. In fact, 70% of the US power grid was built 25 years ago, the infrastructure. And what I think is like when we're always at war with another country, the risks of a cyber threat, EMP attacks, and coordinated physical sabotage, which we've seen some of that in the past, those are wide open. And you know, we always have the potential to lose our power systems here in the US, especially. And they have something called substations where they try to distribute power. Those are not even protected more than just a chain link fence, to be honest. So with the right tools, you can easily knock out the power grids, the region's power grid right there and then for days and weeks. So, and then on top of that, we've been warned in the past so many times by, you know, the World Economic Forum, some of these other players all over the world. And I saw some very powerful comments in here saying that Bill Gates is owning some of the water rights, the water companies. And yes, this is potentially how they could weaponize a system against their own people. And at the same time, when you start to think about how we're being bridged into a digital system, they can easily get you to adhere to certain conditions to participate, whether you're going to travel, get some water, digital IDs, things of that nature. So this is why I'm always emphasizing the importance of hard assets, you know. And what happens typically when the power goes out, like you said, banks can freeze, ATMs stop to work, credit cards can fail. So everything digital just kind of goes under. Stock markets can even be frozen and then manipulated afterwards. So when they come out, the markets have tanked significantly. So even if you own crypto, you know, if you don't have in cold storage offline wallets, you are subject to all of this. So you could potentially lose everything just like that. So this is why you need hard assets like gold, silver to barter with, have some cash. Mentioned this so many times. You need self-custody of digital assets, but more important, I think water, survival, you know, necessities for survival. That's what's key here. Water, food, non-perishables, thing of that nature.
Yeah, there's no doubt it also increases the risk of cyber attacks. I mean, we still don't fully know what are going to be the consequences of this major cyber attack, not cyber attack, sorry, power blackout, let's call it as it is. But I heard also people talking about anomalies happening in the bank accounts. So yeah,
Yes.
that opens for a lot of possibilities. And I think that's also tied to the poor economical situation that we are living right now. And we had a call this weekend and we were talking about how now when you go for the groceries, let's say, and you spend $100, it feels like you are spending, let's say, $20. And I have the same feeling here in Europe. I mean, the €100 bill for me now, it feels what it was 5 years ago to spend €20 to get the same amount of groceries or whatever you want to pay services. So the economical situation keeps getting deteriorated. And now they have so many narratives on how they can manipulate the stock markets. And now they have this power grid situation happening in Europe. You want to make some thoughts on that, Versan?
I mean, I'm hyped up about this. I always am. And I hope I'm not talking a bit too fast here. But like you said, Edo, we've spoken about this so many times. And it's just crazy because if you look at the overall economy, even with Trump in office, and you know, people are telling me we have to be patient. We have to be patient for what, right? It's certainly not improving, and I don't want to use headlines to support my argument here. I'm going to kind of explain things because if you look all over the world, what's happening, and I'm going to get into this in a second, but you know, people are borrowing so much money right now just to make ends meet, and they're spending less. And that's when money stops circulating around the economy. The economy slows down even further because people aren't spending money. Money needs to circulate. People are already defaulting on their personal loans and their mortgages are rising. And at the same time, people are defaulting on their mortgages. There are also people in the West and all over the world that are trying to sell their homes, and there are no buyers because, again, people aren't spending money. So it keeps going. And at the same time, you see layoffs. Those are ramping up too. Layoffs are increasing. More people are losing their jobs. Even from friends of mine locally here in Houston, Texas, some of them just got laid off last week. And this is a current trend I see. It's ongoing. AI is disrupting the entire sector, many sectors, in fact, and it's going to continue to accelerate. And if we look at this firsthand from our personal clients from the Black Swan capitalists, we have clients in Germany, we have clients in England. I had a client out of Russia the other day, which was very interesting, from Australia as well, and many other countries around the world, and the same damn story everywhere. Inflation is soaring. And some of you who follow me on Instagram saw my post. I post some things on my story, and I spent over $500 on groceries, and it's only going to get worse. Now, a lot of people tried to twist that, said, Versan, you bought a lot of stuff. Okay, that's fine. But I do spend more money on groceries nowadays because I understand that when I come back to the store, the prices are going to keep climbing. I'm actually friends with the owner of that store. It's called Phoenicia. It's an Arabic store. And he even told me directly, costs are rising and we have no choice but to raise our prices because our rents are going up and we can't even stay in business anymore. So this is happening everywhere. In Germany, I'm here talking for a friend of mine, Maria, electricity and energy costs are skyrocketing. So my point is people are suffering. And I hate when people say I'm trying to be doom and gloom here. I'm not. A lot of people are saying it's doom and gloom when I'm just giving you the facts, and ignoring the reality isn't going to help anybody else. Your silence around something is your obedience. So to your point, Ido, people need to be very smart about how they're positioning themselves for what's ahead, because I think before we reach this so-called golden age that these people keep referring to, if it ever happens, there's going to be real pain for the majority of people. And that's the truth, guys. Even people in our own circle, they're taking necessary steps to protect this, because some people are actually sliding into poverty gradually but steadily. And final thought on this, Edo. I know a lot of XRP holders, a lot of them, and they are suffering as well. Now, they're not going to go talk about this, okay? And these are content creators. They're suffering because they're putting all their eggs in one basket. And I was the one telling these guys behind the scenes, you need to diversify your portfolio, because just waiting for XRP to blow up, it's not going to work, because a real utility base case kind of scenario is going to take a long time to play out. We've said this for many years. We don't even think XRP is going to blow up until there's a real catalyst where the demand is skyrocketing for it, right? So if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, that's not a good strategy. You need to be diversified, because I think most people are going to get wiped out until geopolitical shifts play out if they're not playing this game the right way. So just be positioned properly. And again, it's not doom and gloom. I'm here trying to help people, and I'm doing this myself. I'm sharing my playbook with everybody. How many times have I told people to get water? How many times have I said, go get non-perishables, groceries, because prices will go up? They are continuing to go up. And I know Edo mentioned this in the beginning. We have a lot to talk about. So I'm seeing a lot of comments here about the XRP ETFs, real world assets and tokenization. And we're going to get into that. So baby steps.
Yeah, before we move ahead, I will play this clip here. It's just a minute clip. And this is the one that I have said before that came live. I think it was 2 months ago. And they were telling for Europeans to be ready for the next crisis, which is all tied to Events 201, if you are familiar with the World Economic Forum, or the one that was linked with the cyber attack. I forgot the name. It's Cyber Polygon. So I'm going to play this one real quick, and then I think we can move to tokenization.
It's in my bag, survival edition. First up, my glasses. Super important if you want to see what is happening or not. Next, my document in a waterproof pouch, a must in a rainy Brussels. Now, let's talk about lighting. I have a flashlight. If you don't forget the matches and, of course, the light. Turn. And water, of course, because water is life. And my special friend, a Swiss Army knife. 18 tools in only one knife. A must-have. And don't forget your medication. You might need it, because you never know. And don't forget something to eat. You might be hungry, very hungry. And of course, some cash. In the middle of a crisis, cash is king, and your credit card might just be a piece of plastic, a charger, and a power bank, because a dead phone is a dead end. Playing cards, bit of distraction, never hurt anyone. And don't forget the radio, the smaller one. This is everything you need to survive the first 72 hours of a crisis. Speaking about being prepared, the EU is preparing its strategy to be sure that every citizen is safe in case of crisis. Be prepared, be safe.
Yeah, this is the European Commissioner. Of course, she's a psychopath. You can see the way they have done this video, kind of making fun of the population. That's quite disgusting, but that shows that they are preparing something. I mean, maybe it's starting today, maybe not. I just think it's important for everyone to be prepared, and especially I have made a few tweets about this yesterday, and it seems it was quite prophetic, where I was telling everyone it's not a financial advice, but that you should move your XRPs out of exchanges. I think that's extremely important. I think under times of uncertainty, you must have cold wallets.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That was a bit creepy, but she's right. And you need to be able to survive in such a crisis, because what happens is, number one, rations and portions are actually enforced at grocery stores. Example, if you go to buy a bunch of water, they're not going to tolerate that. They'll allow you to take 2. So here's a loophole around that. You go with your wife, your spouse, your girlfriend, and y'all pretend you don't know each other, and you take separate carts and at least go get, so you're 2 different individuals. That's a good idea. See, that's a solution. There's always some sort of solution, but that's why you want to get things ahead. My brother and I, we have a warehouse, and a very cheap one, a storage unit, I would say. And we have candles in there, we have matches, we have water, we have things of that nature, just survival things, and these are investments we made a long time ago. So we're just kind of, after the pandemic, really, we realized what happened, because you'd go to the store and there was nothing there. We had to kind of drive around. We went to different locations. So this is why you want to be prepared, right? Because you could even use that as a bartering mechanism too in the future. Maybe you could trade some water for some gas or something of that nature. And I'm being realistic. I mean, at the end of the day, even when we're talking about investing, guys, like, why the hell are we investing? To profit? Why? So we can survive, right? So it kind of circles around each other. But yes, I hope people take action, and these things are at your disposal right now. And there could be a moment in the future where they might weaponize the food industry to get people to adhere to these conditions for the new system. Because that was what they talked about, is that if we didn't have digital IDs, things of that nature, you wouldn't be able to participate in this economic system. So I think that's still where it is going, right? And we'll talk about that in a bit. But overall, just be ready, because anything could happen. That's what a black swan event is, right? You're not expecting it, and it just happens. And this is, again, why we call ourselves black swan capitalists. We're always prepared for scenarios that potentially could happen, and we always profit, from those scenarios, because we're just ready. In this case, we wouldn't be profiting, we'd be surviving. So we still capitalize if you think about it.
I'm trying to pull on the screen. I think it's very relevant to come back to that topic of the super funds mentioned by Jim Rickards. Versan, you wanted me to pull that video on?
Which one?
The one that you made viral on X. I'm just trying to locate it. So that's tied.
A lot of people did see it. I think you're talking about the 150 trillion.
Yes, because
I know it needs more explanation. I understand.
Yeah. I have it on. I have it here. I'm gonna present it.
Okay.
Okay, I got it. You can see the screen, yeah?
Yes.
Because I think we finally have the full explanation for this. We had a call this weekend, and I think it's important to provide further explanation for the people about what is this video about. So I'm gonna play it. It's 1 minute clip.
Congress quietly established something I call a secret trust for the American people. And for more than a century, this fund has quietly grown untouched into a $150 trillion fortune. That's enough to pay off our entire national debt 4 times over. If you divided it by the number of households in the US, it would be enough to turn every American family into a millionaire. Now, this trust should have enriched generations of Americans. That was its intended purpose. Instead, for more than a century, it's remained sealed off from the public. But that's all about to change. Thanks to President Trump. You see, for the first time in more than 40 years, the president has the authority to release this secret trust. It's all thanks to a 2024 Supreme Court ruling. That ruling had paved the way for President Trump to unleash this $150 trillion wealth reserve. And he's clearly stated his intentions to do so. Look, if you understand what's coming next and you take the proper steps today, you could watch your net worth soar in the coming years.
Okay, yeah, I see a lot of comments. Listen, yeah, I'm friends with Francis Hunt. When he says it's BS, I think he's, the videos are scripted, but I can promise you it's not artificial intelligence. If you watch his first explanation he did about ICE 9 scenario, I think many of you remember that from 2016. The whole thing seemed to be scripted but it was a real video, right? My point though is that like even Goldman Sachs, Nomi Prinz, when she talked about how the financial technology was going to be put into motion, she talks about it so scripted, but it's still a real video. And what I try to do is I take everything with a lot of grains of salt and pepper. I really do. I listen to all kinds of stuff. And what I try to do is make sense of what's something that doesn't make sense, right? And when I started to acknowledge, okay, well, what the hell is Jim Rickards really talking about here? I started to dive a bit deeper and deeper. And you're talking about then intersecting that with what Treasury Secretary was saying briefly when Trump got back into office, and that is preparing to monetize vast resources of the United States, because this is a fact. When Trump got in office with all these executive orders now and deregulation of things, not just the banking system, but deregulation of government with the climate change narrative and agenda, these things are real and they're happening. And basically, it's giving the government to monetize its assets, everything from the vast natural resources to even sovereign debt. So they publicly talked about this, and I'm trying to connect the dots here, right? So whether it's scripted or not, and I think it is, to be honest, a lot of these people, they don't just freeball it, right? They read a script and they explain these things. But again, looking at what the Trump administration is already doing, I've tweeted about this a few times, even in the past before, but not realizing how things were going to play out today. But they're going to monetize their assets, and that's going to be a mechanism to stabilize the markets today here at home. But it's also important to understand what's the real intersection of such a wealth transfer, which a lot of the things that we do talk about already kind of check out. And that is the wealth transfer that's underway. And that's exactly what I think Jim Rickards is hinting at. It's the idea of this whole 150 trillion trust. I really could give a shit whether there's a real trust or not. But when you dig deeper, it's becoming more obvious that the real bridge to whatever shift they're talking about tokenizing these assets, is through real world assets. And that's RWAs. A lot of people wanted to talk about this here. So I think that's what they're saying here. It's been confirmed by many experts already that we are going back to some sort of commodity-backed framework. We were talking about this in 2022 when Simon Hunt came on our show and even confirmed a lot of what we were saying back then too. So we are heading back to a commodity-backed framework where tangible real assets are going to be valued tied directly to digital currencies or their representation, you could say. So the tokenization of real-world assets is going to be at the center of this wealth transfer, you could say, on a global scale. And eventually what we're talking about is over time, not yet, but when regulatory frameworks are in place and the legitimacy of the technology and so forth, you're talking about over $1 quadrillion in value moving forward. So 150 trillion is nothing compared to the kind of wealth we're talking about as it's all bridged into this new digital system. So we're still in the setup phase, I would say, and banks are now stepping in for the tokenization space, and this pace is accelerating very fast. If we go back to what we were talking about in January, Edo, remember we were talking about how Trump was going to deregulate the banks? Well, what the hell was that document from the Federal Reserve the other day when they said we're going to withdraw the guidance of banks with their digital assets? that's exactly what we're talking about. It's paving the way now for banks to get involved in this. Hence, you can align that with the whole ETF narrative now being approved. And we can talk about that in a minute too. But the whole 150 trillion trust, I think it's all about the natural resources and the integration of blockchain technology and real world assets, the RWAs. So that's kind of where I'm really focused on.
No doubt, I have been watching some presentations from the World Bank and also from the International Monetary Fund, and basically they all talking about tokenization of real world assets. So they highlighted some key elements on at which stage we are at talking about real world asset tokenization. And basically they say that the technology is ready. It's only about the regulatory framework. So it's not even a matter of is the technology ready or not. And when they mention the technology and knowing all the connections between the World Bank, for example, which we consider to be the central bank of central banks, which technology are they hinting towards? It's always XRP and XLM and a few others. I have uncovered one of the key documents where they mentioned the tango, the perfect tango, and they were referring to XRP and XLM. And considering that these are the optimal blockchains for tokenization of real world assets. They have the speed, they have the low energy consumption, which Bitcoin blockchain simply isn't capable of. It really hints that we are not that far from adoption. I really think putting that things on a scale, I'm not saying it's going to happen until the end of 2025, but if we're going to put things at scale, considering that the most difficult part is to come together with a technology. And if they are telling you the technology is ready and it's only missing the legal framework, that means that we are already at advanced stages of tokenization of real world assets. I see you pulled something on the screen. Central banks kick off tender for cross border payments network operator. I love how they highlight central banks. So it's a multitude of central banks. Versan, want to make some comments on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's been nothing but a constant stream of good news for XRP Ripple, what they're trying to do. Real quick, let me answer a question. My brother will be coming on next week, guys. I'm sorry. We are both very busy and dealing with sessions, videos. We have so much going on over there. I'm sorry, guys. My brother will be joining us next week, 100%, maybe David too. And Andy Scheckman, we're trying to get him back on to join us as well. Where was I now? Okay, so yeah, we see a constant stream of good news with Ripple, and this has been ongoing since 2012, longer before that. Yes, we see Ripple growing, and they are consolidating all the digital infrastructure. They are building the on and off ramps, building those liquidity corridors. So they are gradually revealing themselves to become like the central bank. And of course, central banks are already positioned for any of this. And I think they're in the test phases still. The final thoughts on where Ripple is going with all of this is the regulatory frameworks. And that's going to have to be something to do with gold. If you go back to Basel III, we were talking about this back in 2022. We're seeing already a lot of this be broken down. And I'm sorry, I laid out quite clearly. Basically, central banks have been quietly preparing for this transition for years. And it's going to align with the Basel III requirements for for international settlements. And it basically makes it mandatory for central banks to hold those significant gold reserves on their balance sheets to strengthen their positions for the next financial system. Hence to what Trump said, even he who holds the gold makes the rules, right? And it's funny because it was Andy Scheckman who actually put that out there a very long time ago. So he's now reiterating this. And that's exactly why we've also been seeing central banks buy gold at the highest levels ever. And most people don't even realize still that it was 2017 when gold was reclassified as a tier 1 asset class, and it's being treated as a tier 1 asset class, zero risk compared to something like bonds, right? Bonds is high risk now. So this has not been announced publicly. It was reserved for insiders, I think, and banks. And when we start to see, again, this alignment of monetary framework that's backed through stable coins and real world assets, resources, and so forth. And it's directly also linked to physical gold. The intersection is already happening. So this is what the next stage is for all of us to see this kind of come in together. And if you look at the Trump administration, they're already accelerating the narrative around this. And so it's very positive, I would say, for crypto holders, those who are at the forefront of all of this, investing in the technologies. So, yeah.
We have more news aligned with, well, that's discussable if it's good news or bad news, but we had a major XRP ETF being approved in Brazil. Not only approved, it's already live. So let me just share here on the screen.
ETFs.
So the first XRP ETF officially goes live in Brazil. I did a video uncovering that if someone is interested to watch the full breakdown of how this ETF actually works. We had seen an inflow of capital towards XRP since the launch of the ETF. It was performing quite better than the overall markets. It's also interesting that Brazil, I don't think is a coincidence. It was the first country to launch the ETF on XRP. I know Brad Garlinghouse has met with the president of the central bank in Brazil a couple of years ago. It's called CampusNet. Also, Brazil has a very efficient payment system. It's called Pix. And well, there are some connections, and we can highly suggest that Pix might run on top of the XRP ledger. So I think Brazil is kind of a testing ground for XRP. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, Versan. I know you are not a huge fan of ETFs. I think it's a double sword, right?
Yeah, I mean, when XRP ETFs do get approved, I think it's just interesting. Okay, it's good for the community. Okay, I just want to be honest about the conversation, right? I've always seen ETFs as a mechanism to siphon wealth away from people who don't actually own the asset. And of course, people are going to twist it, sugarcoat it. You see a lot of this in this space. Max Avery did that once to me, trying to explain it, and we kept going back and forth. I'm just not going to argue with people who don't want to acknowledge the facts behind what the narrative is. All right, that's exactly what happened in traditional markets. If you go back and look at the ETFs, they gave people a way to speculate on something without ever truly being part of it. And they're doing the same thing here. And it's the same people who are missing out on almost every major transition because they never had any real exposure or ownership. Now you can just have some exposure. So the positive side about an ETF is it's definitely going to bring volume, mass acceptance, adoption, liquidity. You can align those with the facts that the Federal Reserve, again, recently withdrew its restrictions on banks holding crypto assets. That's not a coincidence. They're all working in this together. But basically, they're paving the way for more liquidity, more acceptance, more speculation, and ultimately more adoption, right? This is where it's going. And for those of us who are actually positioned at the forefront of these technologies, that is going to be a good thing. But here's what really bothers me. I just see so much excitement about from the XRP community, especially over this. And it's kind of funny. I get it. Okay. But it just shows also a deeper misunderstanding about how finance really works, because these are the same folks who are saying, hey, we're going to free ourselves from the system. And yet they're cheering for the very same institutions that are stepping in to control the narrative through ETFs. I mean, there's a huge conflict of interest over there that a lot of people aren't recognizing. Is this ignorance, or is this just, stupidity? I think it's a little bit of both. At the end of the day, ETFs are about it's not about empowering individuals. ETFs are about putting institutions right at the helm of basically the new financial system. And just like what we saw in traditional finance. So again, ETFs are going to bring capital into the space. That's good for price and liquidity, you could say. But until then, it's just still speculation, not ownership. So I've always encouraged people, even those who take our sessions, right, to learn about real self-custody, how to become your own bank in a very different way. And that's going to be revealed over time. Also owning hard assets, I think. And then, of course, the best performing digital assets outright, but not just speculating through paper contracts. And that's what ETFs are going to do. Because some people, you truly own something. You're part of the future that's being built, not just a spectator on the sidelines like everybody else. So my final thought on the ETF is it's a tool, but it's not for you. It's for institutions. And I think people need to understand the difference. That's all.
Yeah, I truly agree. It opens more ground for speculation and market manipulation, especially.
Of course.
We have seen that happening with Bitcoin as well. On the screen, we see that not only in Brazil, but the SEC has approved an XRP ETF, but it's not spot ETF. That's for future. So still, we don't have a spot ETF on the United States. It's set to be launched on the 30th of April. And there's something else I wanted to share. Just a second, I have to upload the page here. And this is also very unique. So we have Stellar here, which is mentioning Black Mirror. I know some of you are familiar with. This is a Netflix series, which we spoke already here on the Turning Point. And what happens on Black Mirror is that they make like a future scenario where everything is tokenized. So they tokenized even time, they tokenized hours of work, they tokenized water. And yes, someone in the comments says that I love Black Mirror predicts the future. Well, I would argue that the people who made Black Mirror, they know what's coming. So it's not that they predict it, they kind of shape the future. And I think it's very unique that we have the official page of Stellar, so that's for XLM, where they say Black Mirror episodes, but it's a future where you are your own bank, transfer cost pennies, and your money travels with you. Oh, wait. Well, that's already a reality with XLM, but it got me so much interested to know that Stellar is mentioning Black Mirror, and it really feels like we are about to live an episode of Black Mirror. If you ever watched, so you know what I am talking about. If you never watched it, I would 100% advise you. I don't think it's just a series. That's kind of a documentary of where we are heading towards. When I watch it, I even get a bit uncomfortable because I truly understand that we are moving towards a planet where everything will be tokenized on real world asset tokenization, even natural resources. So you're going to see tokenization of water. And with that being so much advanced, we can only be early investors on the right technologies because you ultimately have only two choices. You're going to be an early investor or you're going to be a late adopter where your water consumption is going to be limited through some distributed ledger technology. So you better have ownership of the tokens, meaning you can't own through ETFs. That's the whole point I'm trying to make it. You want to be the real owner of your assets. So you're not going to fall for the modern slavery system, as someone mentions in the comments. And that's why you need to do self-custody. I made a video this weekend where we have right now around 6 million XRP wallets. So there are only 6 million XRP wallets in existence. And if we consider that a lot of people have the XRPs on exchanges, meaning they don't really own the wallet address, it's not theirs, that belongs to the exchange. If there is an exchange collapse, which already happened in the past with, if you know the history of Bitcoin, empty Gox, or if you want to go more in a recent episode, FTX, they collapsed the exchanges and everyone lost their assets. And the only form of paying back these people who were affected by the exchange collapses is that they didn't give them back on Bitcoins. They did the equivalent of USD by the time of the collapse, meaning that all of these people, for example, when empty Gox took place, Bitcoin was trading at $400, so they missed the $20,000 rally for Bitcoin. So a lot of people say, yeah, the elites would never allow us to get rich out of XRP. Well, first and foremost, it's only about 1 out of 5,000 people being conservative, because we can even talk towards 1 people out of 10,000 people are actually owning their XRPs. And considering the price right now, it's extremely rare that someone holds more than 10,000 XRPs. So I think that clarifies that you should do self-custody. I'm really pointing out towards self-custody here.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree with you. If I may, Edo, I would like to address a few comments. Number one, somebody said something about you will own nothing you will own XRP and you will be happy. That's funny. That's clever. But you know, the whole saying own nothing and be happy, I've reiterated this so many times, is a tokenized economy. That's what they're talking about. So it's subliminal context behind it and soft disclosure for what is inevitably coming, and that's tokenization. Second thing is, all somebody said, the Rickards video is a pitch for a product he sells. Totally agree with you, but remember what I said about picking up the facts that you can actually digest and dissect over there, and not taking the whole thing in all at once, right? When he was selling some products, there were some stocks, I remember that at the end. First thing I knew was to kind of cut the video in that area and kind of focus more on the natural resources. You see what I'm trying to do here is break it and then kind of piece it together with the real wealth transfer, and that's real world assets. Digitizing, enabling the tokenization of these vast resources. That's where the wealth transfer is, and it aligns with the Basel III requirements. It aligns with the whole commodity-backed framework, where they're pegging real value of real commodities and resources to digital assets. That's what my message was. It's not to take the whole thing in and acknowledge the product that he's pushing, because at the end of it, I kind of laughed about this. I was watching the whole video, and by the way, I didn't put the whole video up there because you'd get more people saying the same thing, right? Because he encouraged people to check out these stocks in mining companies and energy. And I said, screw that. The real money underneath what he's talking about is the tokenization part of those resources. So that's what I was trying to tell people. So I was trying to break it down for people to understand the real message behind the product he's trying to push. And that's what I try to do here, right? I try to read between the lines. So I want people to understand when I post something, there's so much more going on behind what I'm trying to say. These are the kind of conversations I have every day on the back end that take hours and hours to kind of break down a narrative. And again, many people know this, but everything we're kind of living through right now is so multi-dimensional. And that's where it gets a little weird. And to your point about Black Mirror, Edo, what was I telling you shortly before we got on this call? We were digging real deep into the charts, and not just about price action. And I'm trying to understand charts a little bit better, micro. You know, I'm a very macro guy, so I can start sharing this with people. But what I found was really crazy. And I already knew this was going on, but I always knew that astrology and lunar cycles played major role in world events. That is not an accident, but something that was very interesting is we had a full moon, and shortly after, the Pope passed away at 88 years old. And on that same day, Bitcoin topped exactly at $88,000 before pushing to 90,000. And I don't think that's just a random coincidence. It was too freaking aligned, okay? And when you begin to look at all this, there are so many examples like this as well, where you know, the moon cycles, the cycles of the moon, the astrological alignments, you could say, the major financial moves, they actually line up perfectly. So that's like how deep it really goes. And I try my best not to like get caught up in all those micro level patterns, because I simply don't have time for it anymore. But indeed, you know, it's the rabbit hole goes deeper than most people think. And how intricately mathematics and patterns and gematria, and that's just one piece of it, but how almost like you begin to realize that things have been laid out long ago, like very ancient. And it's a little crazy. Yeah, water's above. Somebody just made the comment. Yes. I'm starting to understand, see what he's talking about. But again, it's just not for me. It's too much. I can't handle it, you know. But I'm aware of it, and that's, I think, important. So yeah, it's crazy. It really is.
Versan, we have 44 minutes, and did we cover already all the topics, or perhaps we can take the final minutes to answer some comments? What do you think?
Sure, why not? You know, there is one thing actually. I mean,
Yeah,
if you're
you want to
interested in
mention?
discussing it, but the one comment I always see when we do these live streams is people keep asking about, you know, Sologenic, Solana, Cardano, and other projects in this space. And to be honest, we can talk about these things for hours, but I understand that in the crypto space, a lot of these digital assets are very cyclical with the 4-year Bitcoin halvings, the debt cycles every 4 years, the liquidity injections into the economy. We've tried to break this down in the past, and that's real, okay? But I'm personally a long-term and short-term holder, and I stick with the technologies that I understand best and the technologies I think, based on the research for years, are at the forefront of many of these transformations we've been talking about. So, um, or the technologies that are built upon the networks that have been at the forefront of this, like SHX and Velo. I keep talking about this since 2024. Those two technologies, they have real fundamentals, they have real partnerships, they have real relationships and real use cases built on the rails that are already being implemented and in motion with financial institutions who actually control the flow of capital. So I'll let you speak on this, Edo, but I do believe in diversification, but just not throwing money into random assets without understanding, I think, the real game that's being played behind it. Example, Cardano. Many people ask me about Cardano. And the truth is, I tried to understand Cardano in the early days. And what I realized is that they were trying to compete in the early days with what XRP was doing. And any institution or any blockchain or any, fintech that's out there that's trying to compete with a system that's already been in motion for a very, very long time with the regulatory frameworks, the interoperability, the institutional backing. And I don't give a crap how high the price goes. It's not going to be part of the long-term architecture. The second thing is I don't trust the founder, whatever his name is, Charles Hoskinson, something like that. I mean, he constantly flipped his narratives over the years, if you remember. He changed his arguments. He jumped from one side to another, and now he's trying to align with what's already been built. So I see through the bullshit, and I just don't care enough about it. Solana, every time their market activity begins to spike and people try to cash out, heard this from real stories, their network mysteriously goes out 8 times now, maybe 9. So I don't trust these networks that go out. I don't trust the institutions, the networks that are not really at the forefront of all this. Don't get me wrong. There are going to be other technologies with real potential that are maybe complementary to what's already in motion, but I prefer to stick with what I understand best and what's in my arena, but more importantly, closer to the capital. So, it's all about risk ratio reward and, of course, what your financial resources are. Personally, I work with the resources that I had in the early days. It has benefited me very nicely. Same goes for my brother. And at this point, I'll stick to what I know best because it's working. That's all.
Totally agree, Versan. I think there is no reason to over diversify. Diversification is important, but if you are not a multi-millionaire, I don't think it makes sense to be holding like 20 different assets. I did that mistake in the past, and honestly, it was better to just stick to the fundamentals. Let's say XRP, XLM, Velo, SHX, XLM, HBAR. Pick up the ones that central banks are focusing on. And that goes for what you said with Solana. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Solana halts down every time there is high usage, the network goes down, and it's way more than 8 times. That happened hundreds of times in the past 3 years. And I like to see what has worked. So if you take the XRP ledger, for instance, it only had 3 downtimes on its entire existence. So that's the more robust and reliable blockchain to ever exist, which is already compliant with most of the regulatory framework. So you want to see this from multiple angles. It's not only the technology, but it's also what is Ripple doing behind the scenes. And there is no competition. When you understand that nobody can compete with Ripple or XRP in the same playing field, then you might understand why I don't hold any Cardano, for example. I don't really feel that I should be trusting a company where the founder is always changing his mind, and one week he says something and the other week he's changing, and we have better technologies than Cardano and also better technologies than Solana and better technologies than Ethereum. And even if we look to the charts are reflecting the technologies right now, and it's the first time in crypto where the charts are reflecting the technology. And if you take Ethereum, for example, it's down almost 70%. Solana is underperforming this bull run as well. It's barely keeps up with inflation. And if you have all the XLMs, the XRPs, these were the best performing assets this bull run, and that for me is an indicator that the flip the switch moment, I don't think is going to be something that happens exactly like a flip, but it might be a gradual flip that has already started. And I think 2025 marks the timeline where we're going to see the intersection of utility markets with speculation. And I think in the next 5 years, we're going to have this gradual switch, when we're going to see the real transformation and we're going to see the difference. I think we're going to really separate what's useful of what is just speculation, and then we're going to have a different category of digital assets that are not going to respond to the market fluctuations. I truly believe when utilities here, we're going to have, for example, not this crazy volatility that we have in crypto markets today, where it can crash 30% in one day. I think the future is going to be more like gold. Perhaps it's going to go down 5 or 3%, and then it means the opportunity is also over. So that's why I think it's very important to be positioned before the flip the switch moment is completed. It has already begun, but it's still in the early stages. And I think right now is a very interesting time to take actions and position yourself on the right digital assets. And I don't think Cardano or Solana or Ethereum are categorized as the best technologies and the ones that are compliant with the regulatory frameworks and what
100%.
central banks are aiming for the future.
100%. And I mean, like somebody's asking, I know this is a joke, but like meme coins, I stay away from meme coins. I really do. There's potential to make money, but you got to be in and out, and just know conscientiously when you're doing this, you're effectively stealing money from somebody else who doesn't really understand, or somebody that's trying to steal money from you too. So you guys are, it's a Ponzi scheme, right? I stay away from meme coins, too much risk, not engaging enough for me. Somebody also asked about Chainlink. Chainlink has its use case. This is what I'm talking about. It has its use case, but for me, for any of this to work, liquidity is the end game. You need liquidity for all these complementary technologies to be able to settle at the highest levels of finance with the kind of demand that is not yet recognized. So it goes back to liquidity. Again, potential. Chainlink has a very big role in this. I talked about this in 2022, that there was going to be a complementary relationship with these certain technologies. And we did mention Chainlink too. It's just not in my portfolio. I just don't care enough about it. I'd rather be heavily invested in only a certain select few assets that are actually paying me very well. And we got into this space in 2019. There are people who got into it prior to that. They're very wealthy already. I'm almost there, but I'm not rich as hell yet. I'm trying to get there, right? But patience has paid off significantly, and the game hasn't even started. Just wait for regulatory frameworks to come into place, right? So until then, you just need to continue to dollar cost average in what you understand and what you can guarantee. And without guarantees, that is going to play some sort of role in where this is going. But liquidity is so important because the markets are illiquid. I mean, if you want me to go on and on, I mean, we have a currency crisis, we have a debt crisis, we have a commercial real estate crisis, we have a global crisis in many different aspects, geopolitically, pressures in the system. I mean, at the end of the day, without liquidity, none of this is going to work. And then finally, somebody mentioned about XDC. I'm very heavy on XDC. I just don't talk about it all the time. Those who take my sessions, I send you guys my portfolio, and it's very simple. And just to clarify, over a long time ago, I did have a vast amounts of investments in different assets. All right. But over time, when I started continuously doing the research and becoming more comfortable with what I'm talking about and teaching, I started to consolidate my holdings into only a few. And today I hold a good amount of each of these technologies, and they are paying off very well. But if you look at the portfolio, it's continuously growing. And sure, you have your fallbacks, your small corrections, but overall, it's at a higher high always. And to Edo's point, with XRP, no doubt, whether people see it or not, it's going to be some sort of form of digital gold akin to the US dollar, but a cross-border functionality. So XRP is a snowball, and it's rolling, and it's going to continue to increase and get bigger to where it can't be stopped. That's what's happening with XRP. So it's a long-term game, but in the short term, you guys know my position. I'm heavy on SHX and Velo. It's paid me twice already 2023, I called Caspa. It's made a lot of people more money than I made because they had bigger positions than I did. So at the end of the day, I just stick to what I've studied and what I'm comfortable with, as long as it has fundamentals. And you have to take profits. You can't just have everything in one asset and wait for it, because you're going to have to sell that to deal with the higher inflation. And you don't want to sacrifice the kind of control that XRP will give you later on down the road. But regulatory frameworks is the next, it's the next big thing that's really going to take this thing off. So, and every day, I mean, we're getting more confirmation of this. So it's you know, step by step, and you just got to be patient, really, and prepared.
As you say, the liquidity is the key. We have watched the charts here, and still it hasn't flipped yet. Still very low liquidity in the markets. Perhaps the aim to global supply, I think that can be the life saving for crypto in the next months to come. But truly what's going to be the game changer in the future is the technologies compliant with the regulatory frameworks, the ones working closely with central banks. And we know which ones are, we always speak about them. And someone asked me about VeChain. Yes, I did a video about VeChain. One of my first videos, actually, long time ago. And what caught my attention was in 2018 when they transitioned from ERC20 and they created their own mainnet. So basically it's not on Ethereum anymore. However, since then, I have kind of found better opportunities. I mean, it was a great runner on the previous bull run, but I truly believe it has been underperforming recently. So I prefer to stick, for example, if I had to choose between VeChain or Velo, I would go 100% for Velo. Again, I'm not talking down on VeChain. I just think there are better alternatives out there.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I'm looking at the comments now, and I love when they just start pouring in like this. Somebody said, XRP is not going anywhere if Ripple doesn't take out Swift. I have documents right now upstairs, and I report on this in 2020, 21, and 2022, which is now breaking and calling resurface breaking news, where Ripple actually swapped their CEOs, and not the CEOs, I'm sorry, lead directors, to go work with each other to integrate these systems together. I have physical documents for this. I've displayed it so many times. Also, one of them, which I send it to people in our sessions, where in 2015, banks were being forced by the Atlantic press and some of the larger institutions to adopt this Ripple Labs technology, that's RippleNet, okay? Because if they didn't, they would not survive this reset. And it openly says it in the document that technologies, if they're not integrated onto these payment systems, these banks that once dominated the space will be shunned out. Basically, you know, they won't make it. And if you look at liquidity, if you look at balance sheets of central banks, and not just central banks, regional banks, there are more mergers and acquisitions happening right now that nobody is talking about. And I guarantee you, if I put a tweet out on this stuff and talk about it, it's not going to get any attention, because what I've noticed is that the crypto community are so desperate for hype, and it's really annoying. Nobody wants the facts; they want the hype that is going to make them confident in what they want to believe in. You have to do your research on this stuff, and it's all in motion. I don't give a shit what people say. Like, at this point, if you can't see it, then you're probably not going to make it. That's all. And it's a real truth. This is a natural selection process. And what I found out is even more interesting. When this reset happens and the majority of people actually get wiped out, that's the truth, okay? Their currencies are going to be licensees. They're going to get licensed to have currency. And that's your central bank digital currency. That's your UBI, your stable coin. I don't care what you call it, okay? You sugarcoat it all you like. And that's what most of these people do. They sugarcoat the facts that we're trying to put out there. So yeah, this is just a warning. And to end this video, not on such a heavy note, but I want to say this to everybody. I love you all. I love all of you. And I don't care even if you hate me, if you don't like what I have to say. And you know I mean that. You know, I just want people to remember this, that there is no doubt that everything that we see happening in the world today, the economy, no doubt, is being dismantled piece by piece. The middle class is still being squeezed harder than ever. And we're being pushed into a new system. So it's not just political or economic. I think it's spiritual. I really do. Underneath all the psyops, underneath all the distractions and these live streams we're doing and all these comments, you know, there's a real war that's being waged. And so many of you, like, I'm honored. I always say this, you know, to be among you and to actually see through this, because you see what's happening here. And you have a responsibility to each other, to your families, to everyone else, to push the truth. That means the facts, not just the level narrative, which is being pushed by all these other YouTubers out there. And X people especially, you know, most of it is just repackaged content. So careful who you're listening to, and at the same time, push the real message. The narrative is not important. We understand the narrative. So those are my final thoughts, man. And
very beautiful words.
yeah, for the technologies, I mean, I'll give you my portfolio right now just so people will stop asking it. So we can focus on other things. I am heavy, and I'll give it to you in chronological order. XRP is my number one, obviously. XLM is my second, and my third is HBAR. My fourth is XDC. I do have a lot of Algorand, and I'm very heavy on quant. Because if it's going to be that interoperability part with the Ethereum networks and some of the others, then yes, it's going to have significant value. So I'm heavy on quant, big on SHX, big on VLO, but that's it. I don't have more than that. I used to, but I've consolidated into what I understand, what I'm confident in. So
he's dropping the secret sauce, guys. He's dropping the secret sauce. By the way, I love to hear you have Algorand. I am preparing a video about Algorand to my YouTube channel. I think it's undervalued. A lot of people are ignoring it, but I think it's one of the most promising projects out there. By the way, can I play this video real quick? I think you know this video very well. It's from the former Swift employee. You know
I know
one,
her,
right?
man. She was supposed to come on my show, and I'm not kidding. Her, Mark Moss, a lot of these people, they rejected to come onto my show because I was gonna basically ask them the questions of these videos, right? I saw this video. I play it for the audience. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's very unique, her face at the end, guys. Please watch her face. Because for the context, this is Laya. She's a BTC Maxi. And let's watch what they have to say on this video.
Surrounding crypto replacing Swift. So we did speak earlier where you mentioned that it's not necessarily about replacing Swift, it's about complementing it. So let's get some more information on this.
I used to work for Swift. I was Swift for 20 years, so Swift is flowing through my veins. Swift is the preeminent messaging system for the financial industry. And I think we're also seeing that Swift are changing their network capability so that real time will be a possibility as well. But we may also see Ripple XRP moving across the Swift network as a currency when we're perhaps using something like FX.
Now, so, I just slightly moving on for a second, surrounding crypto replacing.
Yeah, guys. So,
oh my God, the devil is in the detail. Did you hear what he said? Complementing. See, that's the only word I caught from that because that's what matters. The devil's in the detail, always is. And final thing, I think Brad Garlinghouse was speaking to somebody publicly and on CNBC or something. He's now going out there on the mainstream a lot more. And if you read in the bar, and that's really where I got the real information from, it said, I'm trying to quote it the right way. XRP is at the heart of what Ripple is trying to accomplish. You see, that for me, you know, it resembles a lot with what and resonates with what we've been saying here. Somebody's saying I should do a show with Mikkel. Mikkel, oh my God, I got a history with that guy. Mikkel called me an idiot once publicly on his YouTube channel in 2022. Or 2023, and then he just started repeating what I've been saying, and I think he deleted that video. And it's when I talked about the IMF setting a price, and I explained this thoroughly in many papers and different videos. I also met with Mikkel publicly in Florida at the QFS summit, which I will never attend something like that again. It was a joke. They tried to sabotage me on stage. That's not a joke either. They changed all the questions at the last second. And this was all prepared in advance. And I'm not kidding. They tried to sabotage me on stage. It was, awful. So, it kind of shows the true character. I did meet these people in person. A lot of them are in this for the hype. I don't think they have all the facts. They're just regurgitating what my brother and I have been saying since 2020. Our first YouTube channel got shut down, and all that stuff was put onto Rumble. And yeah, most of it was repackaged. I'm not kidding. So I don't, none of these people existed until we put our interview with Jimmy Valley, and that's not a joke. So yeah, not crybaby here, but those are the facts. You guys have no idea who the hell you're listening to. Some of y'all that are leaving these stupid comments. But yeah, the real source, we put out a lot of the stuff in the beginning that got this to go viral. So I'm not going to discuss things with people who are basically riding off the rails of what we've done. That's the best way to describe it.
People are out there just reading scripts and
articles. You know who my friends are, Edo. I know Robert Kiyosaki. I know Peter Schiff. We've had him on the show before. He's endorsed some of the work we've done. Andy Scheckman is good friends with me. Matthew Piepenberg gave us a shout out the other day. We've been reporting this for years. Lynette Zhang. So many people. Like, we know Clive, like real wealth managers, real big people. Okay. And that's our circle. We don't want to associate ourselves with these kids, in my opinion. I'm sorry. And it's the truth, I'm not hating on anyone. It's just I rather stick to the facts, because these guys only look at things from one scenario. And they're telling you the whole XRP space. Okay, we've discussed that so many years, but it's important to understand the macro factors behind that too, the geopolitical context, the economics behind it. I'll stick to the real facts. I don't like bullshit, guys, and I can easily share the bullshit narratives with you, but I'd rather stick to the facts, and that's the stuff they don't want to talk about, because it's not going to get their clicks up, their clickbait. I promise you.
Totally agree, Versan. I think we have 1 hour and 7 minutes, so I want to send a special thanks for the audience. We have 5,000 people watching live, and I'm sure thousands of people are going to be watching the repetition of this episode. Any final thoughts, Versan?
Yeah, stick with the real source. I don't know. I mean, I'm just tired of all the bullshit. There's a lot of it in this space. So, I'm trying to really understand how this is playing out in real time. I'm not here to hype anything at all. Promise you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And drop in the comments your location. Where are you based? And that surely helps us with the algorithm to spread the message. Gonna see you next Monday.
Yeah. I'll try to control my temper.
It's okay, man.
Yes.
We love you for being authentic.
Yeah, I know. It's just when someone asked me to sit down with Mikkel, it just brought all these memories. One person I will sit down with, and I've invited Brad Kimes. I actually am a friend with him, and he knows us very well. And Digital Asset Investor. I tried to bring them both on the show and have a discussion. Those are the people I trust. Those are the people I actually could listen to.
And someone asks here, I think he just joined the live. Have you guys heard about Spain, France, and Portugal electricity outage? Well, if you watch from the beginning, we actually kicked off this episode talking about the blackout that's happening in Europe right now, which is still happening. So there might be some interesting developments, and I am sure we're going to talk about this next Monday as well. So you can just watch the replay for that, all right?
Mm-hmm. All right, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.